Good morning and welcome to the She Persisted Keynote Program. I'm Rose Brock, a library science professor at Sam Houston State University and co-founder of the North Texas Teen Book Festival, which celebrates stories for readers of all ages. Today, I'd like to welcome Chelsea Clinton, Andrea Davis Pinkney, Lisa Ransom Klein, and Atia Bowie to our school day program at NTTBF. Before we begin our conversation, I'd like to further introduce our panelists. Chelsea Clinton is the author of the following titles: the #1 New York Times bestseller, She Persisted, 13 American Women Who Changed the World, She Persisted Around the World, 13 Women Who Changed History, Don't Let Them Disappear, 12 Endangered Species Across the Globe, It's Your World, Get Informed, Get Inspired, and Get Going, and Start Now, You Can Make a Difference. Chelsea's also the vice chair of the Clinton Foundation, where she works on many initiatives, including those that help empower the next generation of leaders. In addition to being a celebrated published executive, Andrea Davis Pinkney is a New York Times bestselling and award-winning author of numerous books for children and young adults. She has been recognized by the Coretta Scott King Author Award Committee with an honor for Let It Shine, Stories of Black Women Freedom Fighters, and a medal for Hand in Hand, 10 Black Men Who Changed America. She's also the author of She Persisted, Harriet Tubman. Lisa Klein Ransom is the award-winning author of many critically acclaimed biographies for young readers. As an author, Lisa's books have received numerous honors, such as the Jane Addams Honor Award, the Christopher Award, the Kirkus Best Book of the Year, and School Library Journal's Best Book of the Year. Her debut middle grade novel, Finding Langston, received the Coretta Scott King Author Honor and the Scott Odell Award for Historical Fiction. Lisa is the author of She Persisted, Claudette Colvin. Atia Bowie is a foreign news correspondent who spent 10 years living and working in Afghanistan and then the Middle East. She's the critically acclaimed author of The Secret Sky and A Land of Permanent Goodbyes. Atia is also the author of She Persisted, Sally Ride. Let me begin by sharing that it's such an honor to get to share this space with you today. Thank you so much for your time. And on behalf of NTTBF and the College of Education at Sam Houston State University, welcome. So I thought we'd begin our conversation discussing She Persisted, a new chapter book series about women who stood up, spoke up, and rose up against the odds. So I've got several questions. Some of them are in parts, but Chelsea, I thought I'd start with you. The last time you and I met, you had just crafted and published the wonderful nonfiction middle grade title, It's Your World, as a way to educate and inspire young people to get connected in their communities and the world at large and find ways to make them better places. So from there, you went on to write and publish the 2 She Persisted picture books, as well as some other outstanding books for young readers. I would love to know more about the inspiration behind those picture books, especially the She Persisted titles.
Rose, thank you so much for hosting us. And I want to thank your team in the background that has enabled us all to come together today in virtual space, because I know that while the audience may just be seeing kind of our 5 boxes, there are many, many, many more people who enabled us to share this virtual space together. And I look forward to hopefully being able to share actual space together when it's safe to do so. I wrote the first She Persisted book, partly in reaction to a specific moment, kind of where we were seeing kind of women who really needed to persist in early 2017, and kind of really kind of bringing the legacy of the great Coretta Scott King kind of into action. And I just was reflecting how so often actually like Mrs. King is thought of as just like Dr. King's widow, when actually she was such an important civil rights leader in her life and really for our country before she met her husband even, and certainly after his assassination. And then I just was thinking about how often the story of our country has been the story of women persisting, whether it's kind of the story of kind of politics or arts or the sciences or education or public health. And when I was kind of thinking about all of this, I had recently become the mother of a son. So I had a daughter who was 2.5, and I had a son who was just a few months old. And I was thinking, wow, I really want my daughter and my son to grow up with strong, celebrated women role models. And I want my daughter and my son to grow up reading stories written by women, centered on women, celebrating women. And I think I felt this way so strongly, partly because of what was on our bookshelves. What was I kind of finding and not finding at our local library or our local bookstore, which is that, this was in early 2017, and the majority of picture books were still kind of written for boys, centered on male voices. That even books about, elephants or goats or cows or frogs were kind of, gendered male and told kind of from a male perspective and in a male voice. And I just was really frustrated by this. And then I thought, well, I should do something about this. Like I should try to help solve kind of this real inequity for young readers, including in my own house. And I've just seen how powerful that's been kind of through the window of my own family, and how, now being the mom to two sons, especially for my 4-year-old, who's part of the kind of original catalyst for this. For Aiden, frequently, his favorite superhero is Wonder Woman. And if you ask him kind of who the, great athletes are that he looks up to, admittedly, because he worships his big sister, he'll say Simone Biles, because Simone Biles is his big sister's favorite athlete. And it doesn't seem strange to him at all that he's naming women. And I think that's really powerful and important. And picture books are the way we often say to children, here's what's possible, or here's what's not. Here's where you're visible, or here's where you aren't. And I just am so grateful to play a really small part in shifting kind of what we're saying to kids is important, is possible, is valued, and is valuable, because I think it really matters for our daughters and our sons.
Thank you so much. I think Aiden's smart. I think Wonder Woman, in fact, is the most important of the superheroes, in my opinion. So a couple, there are many that are fine, but she's amazing.
Yeah. Last night it was thankfully Wonder Woman. I have to confess, sometimes Iron Man and Black Panther displace Wonder Woman, but I'm always thrilled about Wonder Woman tonight. I'm like, yes, Wonder Woman.
It's a good trifecta, though. Those are all good choices. So a couple of follow-up questions, and some of this you've addressed already, but from this perspective, what I'm wondering is did you have a framework or a specific plan on what you hoped She Persisted would do? And then also, I'm curious about how your original volumes, how they influence the expansion of the series, which we're going to be talking to 3 of the authors from the series.
The first She Persisted book was really personal, Rose. It was the 13 women in that book just mean so much to me. There's stories that I grew up with, stories that my mother and my grandmother really kind of privileged and honored and believe it were really important for me to know and to feel a responsibility to. Or they were stories that I learned kind of later in life that were really meaningful to me. And so that book, really kind of were the stories, not all the stories certainly, but kind of were really central stories that I wanted my children to hopefully understand why they were so important to me. I hoped that they would be as inspiring and resonant, to my kids, and really to just young readers more broadly. And then having been kind of on tour for the first She Persisted, and then for kind of subsequent books, how many young readers, girls and boys, just were hungry to know more about these women's stories. And so was just incredibly thankful when my terrific editor, Jill Santopolo, and kind of Philomel Penguin were not only welcoming, but enthusiastic about extending the series into chapter books. And it's also just so fun for me. I promise I won't talk too much about my children, but my daughter, Charlotte, to see her, she was able to read the first Harriet Tubman book, almost on her own. She needed help with a few words that were words that she was unfamiliar with. And that, she was so proud. She was like, Mom, I'm reading a grown-up book now. And I was like, that's great. You're reading a grown-up book. I'm thinking, God, you're 6 though. I don't want you to think that you're a grown-up. But that I could see how proud she was, and that she had kind of been able to just stretch and extend what she had learned about Harriet Tubman kind of from the book or from me, kind of, through reading the chapter book and going on the longer journey. And I certainly hope that kind of Charlotte's experience and kind of the joy that she felt being like, Mom, did you know? And I could say I did know, but some of that I knew before, and some of it I knew because I was lucky enough to read the book earlier on. I got like a secret advance copy of the book. But that she just was so excited by what she was learning is clearly a tribute to our amazing author who's with us today. And I hope that that's the story of every young reader. And I suspect that it very, very much will be for that book and all the books in the series.
Thank you so much. I have one follow-up question, and then I want to dive into talking about these books. So for the educators and the students that are watching, what I'm curious about, and you can answer this quickly, is could you tell us just a little bit about how you went about selecting the authors to be part of this series? Because frankly, like, it's a stellar list of authors, and we feel so fortunate to have 3 of them with us today. But I would love to know just kind of some of behind the scenes. Give us some of the scoop on how this went about.
So when I actually wrote It's Your World, I read a lot of middle reader books because I had never written for that audience. And some of those books were suggested to me by my great editor, and some of them were suggested to me by my nieces and nephews. My husband is one of 11. We have 20 nieces and nephews who kind of stretch from just a couple years older than our oldest to, kind of, they feel like kids to me, but they would probably take great umbrage to that, like you kids in their late 20s. And thankfully, they have all been, like, they're great. Like, I'm so proud to kind of be in a family together with them. But, especially the kids who were in that age group recommended lots of books, and some of them were by the authors now who are part of the Persisterhood of the She Persisted series. So I had a strong hope for some of the authors that I hoped would kind of be part of this, and then I'm really grateful that Jill and others across kind of the larger Penguin family, had other recommendations, and I'm so thankful that everyone we hope would say yes did.
That's wonderful. Well, I agree. What a stellar cast of participants and authors. Okay, so I'd love to start talking to the authors. Lisa, I'm going to start with you, picking on you first.
All right.
You ready? All right.
Yeah.
So much of your work has been centered on examining the true fascinating lives of high-profile athletes and other well-known Black historical figures. Would you tell us more about your work in sharing the life of Claudette Colvin in this volume? And I'm also curious if there are any ways in which highlighting her story was unique in your experiences as a largely nonfiction writer of well-known people.
Well, first of all, thank you for having us here, and thank you so much, Rose. And I'm honored to be here with my fellow authors and Chelsea Clinton. It's just really been a joy working on this project and having the chance to read and to celebrate all these amazing women and be a part of this Persisterhood. So, as to Claudette's life, the challenge here for me was to give readers more of a historical context around the role that Claudette played in the Montgomery bus boycott, which is really seen as a seminal moment in the civil rights movement. So, textbooks and history books really often highlight the name of Rosa Parks, which, they rightfully should in connection with the bus boycott, but very few people know the name of Claudette Colvin. In fact, when I mentioned I was starting work on this project, people would say, I feel like I should know that name, but I don't. And, and this is one of the joys of working on a project like this, is bringing her story to young readers and to adults even. But so few people knew the role that Claudette played before Rosa Parks took that stand, and even after as a key witness in monumental case that ended bus segregation in Montgomery and in the state of Alabama. So in order to kind of help readers understand the extent of Claudette's bravery and why she was such a consequential figure, I had to provide more of an understanding of the time period in which Claudette was living, and how that really highlighted the extent of her bravery. Here's this 15-year-old girl who made this tremendous decision to not give up her seat to a white woman. And readers really only get a sense of how tremendous that act was if they can see that during this time period, the ways in which Blacks were treated. I mean, I've done a lot of research a lot of historical figures, and I feel like I know a lot about this time period, and a lot about these historical moments. One of the things I didn't even know or understand about bus segregation was the fact that Blacks were forced to board the bus, put their fare in, and then get off of the bus and then go around to the door in the back and then board that way. They weren't even allowed to walk from the front all the way to the back because they couldn't walk past white passengers. And so just dealing with those daily, discriminations, I think that Claudette was able to find a way, find her voice, and find the courage to stand up, which was, really an incredible moment for her and for history. One of the things that really differed, though, in writing her story was that typically I'm writing about subjects in history who have lived, decades worth of life. Here is Claudette, who's only lived 15 years, just this very short life. But in that very short life, she developed this real keen awareness of injustice and inequity. And what I think is really incredible about her story is that not only did she develop this keen awareness of it, but she decided to do something about it, which is what I love most about her story.
Thank you. It really is remarkable. I mean, I think about most of us at 15 just being knuckleheads and just to have, well, maybe I should just speak for myself, but I mean, to have that kind of conviction and
Yes, exactly.
it's just really incredible. I honestly, I'm one of probably many people that didn't know much about her. I had learned a little bit from a picture book that I had read, but I think I'm really hopeful that your book will help really shine the light on who she was. I don't know if she is still living or not, but
She is still living, yes.
she is, okay.
Yes.
But what a life. I mean, it really is remarkable. So thank you so much for sharing about her book and about her. Atiya, I have some questions for you. So, your previous work has been classified as YA fiction, but you've spent actually, much of your professional career as a journalist. So I was curious if you could speak to how those experiences as a journalist and fiction writer influenced your efforts while researching and writing about Sally Ride.
Well, that's actually a great point when it comes to YA fiction, because despite me being a YA fiction writer, I tend to call it realistic fiction. Because of my experience as a journalist, I was covering war zones for the most part. I covered the Iraq War, the war in Afghanistan, and it was when I was covering the war in Afghanistan when I got the great opportunity to write my first novel. In fact, months before that I got that opportunity, I remember telling myself, okay, I have a dream of writing a book. Well, let's cross that off the list and get it out of the way because I no longer have an imagination. Which, let's be honest, as a journalist, you should not have an imagination. Unfortunately, we're seeing a lot more journalists creating their imaginations and using it recently. But my imagination was gone, but I had this great opportunity to write a fiction novel based in Afghanistan. And then my next book was based on the Syrian refugee crisis. So my best approach was to approach it as a journalist, to give the truth to the readers and to be respectful of the people that I'm writing about and write their truth as well. So I approached it as a journalist: research, get all the stories from around you and then put it together and create this novel that's considered fiction, but it really is a compilation of real stories about real people. I feel like that's a huge responsibility for the readers that I have to make sure that I'm giving them the truth, and my responsibility to my subjects, because I don't want them to come back and say, no, you got this all wrong. I also respect that fact that some people might have different stories than others. So I just want to be able to say, this was a real story told to me by this person. And that's how I put it in my novel. Now, bringing it into Sally Ride, again, I approached it as a researcher, as a journalist. I wanted the truth. And in fact, again, a huge responsibility to my readers to give you Sally's story, but also to Sally herself, because she unfortunately did pass away in 2012 from pancreatic cancer. And so I can't send the book to her, have her take a look, see if I'm missing anything, which, you know, I was able to do with my novels. When I was talking to a Syrian refugee who was a doctor who lived in Raqqa, I sent him those chapters. I was like, can you see this? Because I can't get into Raqqa. Can you make sure that this is right? I was blessed enough to be able to speak and chat with Tam O'Shaughnessy, who was Sally's partner in life. So that was a great blessing. I was able to read a book by Lynn Shear, who is an incredible journalist who wrote the best biography about Sally for adult readers. And, you know, what's remarkable about today is the fact that we have the computer, we have the internet. And although Sally's not alive, her impact is there. Her videos are there, interviews are there. I could hear her story from her own voice, despite the fact that she died 9 years ago. So I did approach it as a journalist, but I also wanted it to be, you know, palatable for the readers. So, you know, you incorporate the fun stories of her life as a child, the fact that, you know, at the age when she was young and growing up, she never even dreamt of becoming an astronaut because it wasn't a possibility for her because she was a young girl and they did not have female astronauts back then. In fact, she didn't know that becoming an astronaut was a dream of hers until she was in her 20s and she opened up a newspaper and saw that NASA was finally looking for female astronauts. So I approached my novel writing and my writing for a nonfiction book really the same way. I consider myself a realistic writer, I guess. I wish I had an imagination.
Thank you so much. Did you have any feelings of like personal connection to Sally Ride or any kind of, prior to say this assignment of getting to do this work, was there any personal connection you had or personal interest that led you to this path to feature her in particular in your book?
Absolutely. I mean, I think as a young girl, I was lucky enough that I had a Sally Ride to look up to. You know, I was lucky enough that I could have those dreams at the age of 7. And I remember when I was 7, I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to be a foreign service officer. I wanted to be a journalist. I wanted to be a lot of things. And I looked into it. I went to my local library. I got to read some books. But as Chelsea was mentioning earlier, a lot of the books that I read were about men and the things and impacts that they've had on society. Unfortunately, I did not have a book about Sally Ride when I was younger. I knew about her. I saw clips on TV when my parents would watch the news. But when I was young, there weren't books like this for me to read. And I'm hoping that, you know, young girls and young boys, even, as Chelsea also mentioned about her son, this is just as much for my son as it is for my daughter, that they can see that women can achieve, men, women, whoever you are, you can achieve anything that you want. It's not based on your gender anymore.
For sure. Thank you so much. Andrea.
Hi, good morning.
Hi.
Good morning.
Good morning. It's your turn. So besides being a beloved editor for books for young people, which you are, oh my gosh, Andrea, you've been a prolific writer of books that focus on celebrating Black people and experiences. Would you please talk about your journey to capture the life and accomplishments of Harriet Tubman? Harriet Tubman.
Of course. And I have to say, best morning ever to be among the Persisterhood, to be sitting in Brooklyn, New York, yet in North Texas. That is a gift of the virtual land that we're all living in.
Magic.
And I will just say that, I played Harriet Tubman in my school play. And I remember it so well. My mom helped me make the dress. She helped me do the head wrap. And I came out on stage and I said, hi, I'm Harriet, great pride. I'm Harriet Tubman. I helped 300 enslaved people along the Underground Railroad get to freedom, never lost a passenger, never ran off the track. And my parents stood up and the standing ovation, and that's what I knew about Harriet Tubman. What I didn't know, and thank goodness for this series, because I did a lot more research. What I didn't know then, which I know now, which is in the book, was that Harriet made her first attempt at escape at about age 8. And then as a teenager, when she saw an enslaved man trying to escape, he was spotted by the overseer. The overseer hurled a brick. Harriet tried to block it, took a blow to the head, and suffered from that wound throughout her life as she was helping enslaved people along the Underground Railroad. So these kinds of facts in the chapter book format really allowed me to just expand the canvas on Harriet and her life. The fact that she married a guy who wasn't the greatest husband, got away from him, wore the pants, dressed as a man, all of these things. And I think back now, if I were to do that play today, can you imagine how dramatic? A brick, wearing the pants, getting away from a bad husband, all of those things. And again, that's the beauty of the She Persisted books. I think, Chelsea, of your daughter, Charlotte, all of the things that she can learn and know. I'm a mom myself. I have a daughter and a son, and thank goodness for this series, because there's a lot of new facts and new information that we can share with young people today.
I agree. So I'm curious, Harriet's story is seemingly so well known. Does that, or did that present a challenge for you? Because so many people think they know who she was.
Yes. I mean, I thought I knew pretty much everything there was to know about Harriet, and then I kept unearthing these facts. So then there was so much great information. How do you get it all in one book? And that's the beauty of this format, that I was able to include a lot of information that in some of my writings, in picture books, you mentioned the book, Let It Shine. Even in that, I was not able to, because it was 10 women, include all the facts about Harriet Tubman. So in this, I'm able to start with her as a child, follow her up to for her final days in Auburn, New York, and include a lot of great information.
That's wonderful. So my next question is actually for all three of you, Lisa, Atiya, and Andrea. So obviously each of your books is going to introduce young people to the dynamic lives of these persistent women, but would you be willing to maybe offer one teaser or a fact you found most fascinating or interesting about the particular change maker that you featured in your book?
Well, I'd like to actually follow up on Andrea about Harriet Tubman. One of the things I found most fascinating about Claudette was that the weeks prior to her getting on the bus and not giving up her seat, she was studying with one of her favorite teachers during Black History Week, which was the precursor to Black History Month. And one of the people she was studying was Harriet Tubman. And she loved Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman was her role model. She always dreamed of being like Harriet Tubman. And in that moment, and she later reflected on that moment when she made that decision to not give up her seat. And she later said that she felt like Harriet Tubman's hands were pushing down on one shoulder and Sojourner Truth's hands were pushing down on the other shoulder. And it was because of hearing and reading stories about like Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth that really gave her the strength and courage to take that stance.
Wow.
So, we're often and always inspired by the stories of others that have come before us. And that's why, again, these stories are so important.
I love that, Lisa. Right, it reminds me that the Kamala Harrises of tomorrow are thinking of Harriet Tubman right now, and that idea of shoulders, those shoulders that we stand on.
Yes.
One of the facts that's in the Harriet Tubman book that I didn't know, and Chelsea, thank you, Chelsea pointed this out, which was that toward the end of Harriet's life, she wanted to get pension monies for her work as a nurse during the Civil War. She appealed to the government and kept getting no. Did this for 34 years, kept in that fight, persisted, never got it. But the point is, she would not and did not give up. So now a young reader will know, if ever that happens in one's future, Harriet Tubman stayed in that game for 34 years.
Amazing. It's amazing. With Sally, I would say an interesting fact about her that kind of resonated for me as well is that, you have dreams in life. You make that dream. You think that sometimes some people tell you that you can't achieve these dreams. And others will tell you just focus on one thing. But what Sally did is she did have a dream. She had a dream of becoming a professional tennis player. She worked hard at it. She worked day and night at it. She wanted to completely focus on it. And when she did, she realized, maybe I don't love this as much as I thought I did. And she did have another love, which was science. And she decided to focus on science. And again, this is before she even had the audacity, I guess, to even dream of becoming an astronaut. But she was like, I love science. I'm going to focus on science. And so she dove into it. She went to school. She went to college. She went to university. She got her master's. She was getting her doctorate. And that's when she saw the newspaper ad about NASA looking for female scientists. And I think it's a good reminder for young people that you're allowed to have more than one dream. And if that one dream that you've had for years, you're no longer in love with, it's okay to change your dreams. And I hope that's one thing that, children and even their parents, when they read the book, get out of that. And I know for me, that really resonated because I loved my dream as a journalist, and I still do. But I also had other dreams, and that meant putting journalism to the side. And that included starting a family, that included writing books. And it's nice to know that it's okay to do that.
Absolutely. We are many things, right? We can be many things. So Chelsea, back to you for a moment. So I'm just delighted, so excited about this series. You spoke a little bit already about how in the original picture book, about how personal it was, the women you chose to feature. I'm curious about if you could share to our audience about the other books that are going to be featured in this series.
Oh gosh, I don't think I probably have time to talk about all of them. Right?
Or maybe just give us a little, you don't have to give us details, but who's coming?
Oh gosh, well, I'm so excited about, well, of course, like everyone who's coming. I think about Maria Tallchief, who was our first kind of American prima ballerina, and grew up when she was a little girl on the Osage Reservation in Oklahoma, and then her family moved to Los Angeles to really, for her and her sisters, dreams of being able to be dancers, to be performing artists, and just the weight of bigotry and racism that she encountered, that she had the audacity to believe that she could be the dancer that she knew she could be, and that she could actually maybe be the best dancer that had ever been at that point. And then she kind of far surpassed, I think, what she had even imagined for herself, what her dream was. And I'm I loved ballet as a child. I had not even like a thimbleful of the talent that Maria Tallchief did. I though also learned that that's okay too. It's okay to love things that we're never going to even be particularly good at if they give us joy, if the pursuit of them and the embrace of them kind of give and bring us joy. And I'm so thankful that I had ballet and dance teachers when I was growing up who thought it was really important that I knew kind of who our great American kind of foundational dancers had been, even though I was certainly never going to be able to stand on their proverbial shoulders, because again, I had no real talent, that they were such inspirational stories for me, and clearly still are. Or I think about Virginia Apgar, and in the book, Virginia Apgar is actually the woman's story who I learned kind of the most recent in my life. I didn't know about Virginia Apgar until I became pregnant with my first child, with Charlotte, and my wonderful OB/GYN was telling me like kind of what to expect, like when I would be delivering. And she said, when like, the first thing that will happen after your baby is born, because we didn't know if we were having a girl or a boy, is like, we'll perform the Apgar test. And I was like, what's the Apgar test? And I have a master's in public health. Like I have a doctorate degree in international relations with a focus on global health. Like And I had never heard about Virginia Apgar, like, which I still find mind-boggling, because, like, arguably the Apgar test is actually the most common test, like, in the history of the world. Like, the Apgar test is how doctors, nurses, and midwives, like, all over the world, first assess a newborn baby's health, in whether you're in a hospital or a birthing center, or you're giving birth at home, with a trained birth attendant. Like, the Apgar test is what happens. It truly has been the first test that billions and billions and billions of newborns take. I guess, well, the newborns aren't really taking the test, but it's being kind of given to them. And I had never heard of Virginia Apgar. And so I immediately, went and, looked up and tried to read everything I could about Virginia Apgar, and just became in awe of a woman who had been told that she couldn't be the type of doctor that she wanted to be. She couldn't do the type of research that she wanted to do. And yet, thankfully, there were enough people who believed in her, and she clearly had enough tenacity and her own persistence, that she truly revolutionized kind of how we think of welcoming babies into the world, and ensuring that they're healthy, and if they're not, that we know that quickly, so we can intervene quickly. And she has helped save truly innumerable lives. So I'm so excited about all the books that are coming, like FloJo, who had a huge impact on me as a kid, like 1988, watching the Seoul Olympics on this little screen, like Little Rock, Arkansas. And I just had never seen a woman be so joyful in victory. And that had a huge impact on me. Like, seeing a woman, like, own her victory, and do it with such unapologetic, just joy and grace and style, but really that joy. I was like, oh wow, like, it's okay for women to be joyful in victory. Like, that's okay. I think had a even larger impact on me than I knew at the time. So I'm really excited for all the books. Clearly, clearly I'm so excited. And I hope that young readers and their parents, and older siblings and grandparents and others in their lives will understand why I'm so excited, kind of as all the books come out, kind of over the course of this year.
Thank you. I'm excited too. And I 100% remember that FloJo moment. Yeah.
Oh
it was incredible. It was incredible. I was a senior in high school. I remember it well, and just being blown away by it.
Well,
so
I just also have to say, I think my parents were so excited because during the 1984 Olympics, apparently I was much younger. I don't totally remember this, but apparently I was very into pole vaulting, and I tried to pole vault. At home. And I still have a big scar on my chin to prove that wasn't very successful. So I think my parents were like, okay, whew, like, she's into track.
Yeah.
Not the field part. Like, whew, like, okay, she's just gonna, like, run around. Like,
right.
That's less dangerous than trying to, like, vault over the ottoman, which not worked out well 4 years before.
Not a good idea, but running really fast is okay. Okay. Well, I've loved this, but I have, we have to wrap up so that we can get on with the rest of our day, our school day at NTTBF, but it's been such a delight. I have a final question for anyone that wants to answer it. And that is, you've already shared about the hope that you want for this series and what it'll bring to young readers. But since this is school day at NTTBF, and it's about connecting readers to educators, are there any final thoughts you'd like to share about the importance of sharing real stories like those captured in She Persisted, and how that relates to the young people watching today? Not everybody talk at once.
Well, I want to say that this is exciting for me too, to share with my children, and I'm hoping the readers get something out of it. I too did not know much about Claudette Colvin before this, and now my son, who's 6 years old, is doing a project on her for school. We're so excited. He was so excited to read both the Harriet Tubman and the Claudette Colvin books, 6 years old. And now he's excited to get the poster board and write her story, because he knows that his classmates probably don't know about her either. So I'm hoping, I think Chelsea has picked amazing women to showcase that students everywhere and their parents can really learn about. And I'm very grateful for it. I'm so grateful to be a part of the Persisterhood and be connected to these amazing women. And I consider anyone who's interested in these books part of that team. So thank you, Rose, and thank you for bringing the Persisterhood to NTTBF.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'll
Okay.
just say that one of my kind of hopes and dreams is that this is just another great portal for reading. You know, Harriet Tubman had a North Star, and books are the North Star for so many of us. You know, they point us in the right direction, they tell us where we're going, and they keep us on track. So I've now got, you know, every month I get a new She Persisted book in the mail, and they're so collectible, and what a great way to fill a bookshelf.
Agreed. Co-signed.
And I do hope the books inspire us to learn a little bit more. You know, I mean, that these books are, they're a starting point, but there's always more that you can discover. And that, you know, there's Claudette Colvin and there's Sally Ride and there's Harriet Tubman, but who are the other people who are, you know, other persisters who have touched those lives? You know, I mentioned that Claudette Colvin was inspired by Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth. You know, explore Sojourner Truth, explore the other women who have touched those women's lives, and just do a little more research and find out as much as you can.
And I think, you know, just Lisa, building on that, you know, Claudette knew about Sojourner Truth and Harriet Tubman because she had a teacher who thought it was really important that you know those stories. So I would just say, since you asked the question, you know, Rose, about educators, like I'm still in touch with my first grade teacher. And Dr. Mitchell, like, set the bar so high in the best sense for what a great teacher means to me, and what a great teacher kind of can do for kids. And I am so thankful that, you know, 30 some odd years later, she's still, like, you know, is always happy to talk with me and give me advice and give me really awesome hugs when I see her in Little Rock, when it's safe to hug people. But just as, you know, just to say, like, thank you to the educators, but also, you know, we hope you know, like, what an impact you have on your students, clearly kind of through the story of Claudette, or the fact that, you know, shout out to Dr. Sadie Mitchell in Little Rock, Arkansas, because, like, we really are always listening and learning from you.
For sure. Thank you so much, each of you. This has been an amazing time. I've learned so much, and I can't think of a better way to start our day at NTTBF and this weekend. So for students watching, we've got a great day planned for you today. Come back tomorrow. We'll have a second day of programming. That's Saturday, so you could do that, in your PJs, in your bed, wherever you want to do it. Don't do that at school. Do that at home. Save that for Saturday. So thank you all again. It's just been such a delight to get to visit with you. I'm honored that you took the time to join us today. People, go find these, teachers, find these books, use these books, parents, buy these books. We just want to get these books in the hands of kids, and kids, go to your library and get these books. So thank you all. Have a wonderful day, everybody. And we just appreciate you being with us. I'm going to say goodbye. Bye.
Yes. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.